Everybody, hello. Thank you for coming today. My name is Jess Hedgepeth, so I am the Coastal Training Program Specialist over at Rookery Bay. So we are actually a little bit further south than this, off of Collier Boulevard, kind of in between Naples and Marco Island. If you ever want to come visit, you totally should. It's a lovely, beautiful place. And we're very excited to be able to host this lecture series for you guys. This is the first of 3, so you'll probably have seen as it goes through the back, we do have 2 more coming up, which we will talk about a little bit later, but this one is focused on plants. So we have some lovely experts here to help us out. But first off, I would like to give a big thank you to Veranza. They are our sponsor today. Veranza is a leader in advanced organics recycling. They specialize in manufacturing high-quality, contamination-free compost and mulch products through a proprietary process that prioritizes sustainability. By diverting green waste from landfills, Veranza reduces carbon emissions and produces Veranza Prime, a premium compost that enhances soil health, improves water retention, and supports resilient native landscapes. Their commitment to sustainability aligns closely with the mission of this lecture series, promoting healthy soils and responsible land management. Veranza helps create landscapes that conserve water, support native ecosystems, and foster long-term environmental resilience. We're lucky enough to have a representative in the room today, Bob Boyd. He is the South Florida representative, and he has a table over there with some more information. If you guys have questions, I would highly encourage you to talk with him. And they were nice enough to provide snacks and drinks, so please partake in those and enjoy. Yeah, thank you. We always love food. Couple of quick, just really fast logistics. If there is, for some odd reason, a fire alarm, the room does have 2 exits, one straight back there, and one which was the one that you came in through, and you would just head out through the door. Also that one, sorry, didn't see that one behind me. So we have 3 exits. If you have to use the bathroom, go out that door and then just walk all the way through to the other end of the library, and it's in that arched wall, the restrooms. And they do have water fountains over there. With that, I'm actually going to pass it off to our first person who's going to give a little introduction to Rookery Bay, and that is going to be Raquel. Also, as a note, sorry, we are recording these for later, which is why there's a whole shebang with all of the computers.
Hey, can you hear me? All right. Well, my name is Raquel, and I'm the program manager for the Friends of Rookery Bay, and you'll hear a little bit more about what the difference is between Rookery Bay and the Friends. But I would like to start by saying our motto for the reserve is yours to explore, yours to enjoy, yours to protect. National and state parks are, you have to pay an admission to go and enjoy the area. The reserve is 110,000 acres, and it's public land for you to kayak, swim, fish, boat, and there's some areas where you can walk around as well. We do have an admission for our environmental learning center, but besides that, the whole reserve you can enjoy. And of course, we would like you to protect for future generations and help us spread the word about it and why it's important. So like I mentioned before, there's 2 separate organizations. Rookery Bay Research Reserve, it's a state and federal agency, and it focuses on research, education, conservation, and coastal training program, like the ones that you're attending today. And the Friends of Rookery Bay was established solely to support the reserve. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that does that through advocacy, outreach, fundraising, and volunteer recruitment. Both organizations are very closely working together, but they have their separate roles. So it's like a married couple is sleeping on separate beds because each organization is doing its own thing, but very closely working together to share the information to the public here in Southwest Florida. And like I mentioned, the reserve itself is 110,000 acres of water and land. It goes all the way from Gordon Pass at the top, and our border at the bottom is Everglades National Park. So what you see highlighted in purple is what the reserve is. And then that red star at the top is where the Environmental Learning Center is. So both organizations have been protecting this area for about 40 years, and it's about 40% of Collier County coastline. So Collier County is actually the biggest county in Florida, so 40% is a lot, just as a reference for you to know. And we are part of a national network of 30 reserves around the country. There's some of them that are actually coming up, so there might be 2 or 3 more eventually. But our federal partner is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association. And so if some of you are snowbirds or you like to travel around the states, I encourage you to go and look for a reserve near you. They're all very different, all coastal reserves, and they're very unique and beautiful. If you don't know, they are estuaries, and so 70% of the seafood that you eat at some point was in an estuary. So that is why it's very important. Not only that, but of course, that's one of the most important things too. They protect from storms and hurricanes, in this case here in Florida, because they are surrounded by mangroves. So the power of this network is that we all come together and we have a voice when it comes to funding, when it comes to a lot of different things that affect the reserve system. And here in Florida, we are under the Department of Environmental Protection. And there's not only 3 reserves in Florida, but there's a lot of other aquatic reserves and preserves. And so there are 4 million of protected acres here just in the state of Florida, and that is all public land. So it's a big area. So if you would like to learn more about that, I just encourage you to go on the website and see what other reserves or preserves you can visit in Florida. And I always like to show this graphic because this is actually not really updated, but this is just some of the reserve impact that is around the area. So from educating a lot of visitors to a lot of volunteer hours, we actually have 400 active volunteers in the reserve. To educating Collier County's students and protecting sea turtles and birds, mangroves, you name it. There's a lot of different things that we do at our reserve. A lot of research, education, conservation programs go on in those 10,000 acres. And our Environmental Learning Center, for you that haven't visited, we have a lot of different exhibits. There's a touch tank, there's aquariums, we have a cultural and historical exhibit. We also have an art exhibit that rotates every 2 to 3 months. Right now it's photography, and it's always tied to our mission. So the nature, wildlife, plants, fauna, flora. We also do a lot of different programs, classes throughout the season and the year. There's a trail in the back. During season, we have guided walks. And we have a pollinator garden, some picnic tables out in the back. If you ever would like to host a special event, we offer facility rentals there as well. And there's a lot of volunteers giving you an educational experience. Of course, it's a little bit south of here, but if you have the chance, I highly encourage you to go and visit to learn a little bit more about the reserve. And we offer a lot of activities for all ages. So EcoTours, our partner Rising Tide Explorers, is an award winner EcoTour partner. They offer boat and kayak tours, and they are all biologists. So you not only have a fun experience, but you have a very educational experience as well. We have birthday parties tailored for kids, of course, but they also have an educational component. And almost all the kids that have hosted a party with us, they come and say, this is the best party I've ever had. Like I mentioned before, we have art exhibitions. And with that, we offer art receptions that are free to the community. So if you have a chance, go to our website and see. I believe the next one is at the beginning of May. Facility rent and lectures and classes as well. And some of them are painting and photography. During season, we have birding workshops, we have forest bathing. If you haven't heard about that before, is like a slow meditation immersing in nature. So it's not a guided walk, it's more of just like going into nature and taking all in. It has actually health benefits. So if you want to research more about that, go to our website as well. There's some lunch and learns. Jess mentioned that we have it every month, and it was rotating in the screen before, but we have different topic, and we invite people to talk about specific things that relate to environment and nature. And on our special events, there's a lot of different things that we do. Community Day, Festival of Birds. The Friends have the Bash for the Bay coming soon. That is our big fundraising event, and car show and our receptions that I mentioned. So some of the upcoming events, like I said, the Bash for the Bay is actually this Thursday at the JW Marriott in Marco Island, and that is the big fundraising for the Friends of Rookery Bay, so that we can support all the programs that the reserve is doing here. And then the Community Day is May 3rd. It's open to everybody. It's a free event, and we have a lot of different activities like kayak and boat demos. There's painting, face painting, there's trail walking, and we invite all our researchers and educators to share with the public what they are actually doing, because it's very difficult when they're out in the field to actually come across with them and talk about everything that they do. And if you're part of a club or a community and would like to learn a little bit more about us, you can scan the QR code. It's going to take you to a form, or you can go to our website, but we can come to you and talk a little bit more about the reserve and the Friends. And I like to say there's not only one reason, but 180 reasons to become a friend of Rookery Bay, because when you are a member of the Friends, you actually have access to about 180 nature centers around the country. So we are part of a reciprocal program called ANCA. And so when you have a membership with us, you have free admission to our Environmental Learning Center, but there's others around the states. You can learn more at our website. We also have discounts to our nature store, to our eco tours, and also to some of the classes that we offer at the Learning Center. And if any of you decide that you would like to support and become a member today, we give you a bonus month for 13 months of free admission. And how can you make a difference? Well, I encourage you, please share with your family and friends. There's a lot of people here in Collier County that have drove by the Learning Center many times. They said they live here for 30 years and they never heard about Rookery Bay before. That's the only way we're gonna get the word out there is by sharing. Explore the reserve. There's different ways that you can do that. Go kayaking, take a boat tour, or go and take a hike. Attend a program or event, become a member, and also learn about volunteer opportunities or share with someone that would like to volunteer. Like I mentioned before, we have 400 active volunteers at the reserve, but we are always looking for more because it's 110,000 acres. It's not an easy task to do. There's a lot of different areas where people can volunteer and support. And if you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to follow us on social media. Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We're friends of Rookery. We're always posting about all the different cool things that the researchers are doing, the education team is doing, but also about events and programs. And then our website is rookerybay.org. You can also sign our e-newsletter to get more information. So with that, I will give it up to Jess and enjoy this lecture. Thank you for listening.
So coming up next, I'm going to introduce Dr. Joyce Fassbender. So Dr. Joyce Fassbender is an entomologist in the Biological Sciences Department at Florida Gulf Coast University. And she's an ambassador for the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation. She's taught classes in biological sciences and entomology at the college level for over 20 years. Her research interests include insect biodiversity, pollinator and plant interactions, and carrion feeding, insect biodiversity, and nutrition. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Joyce Fassbender.
I will try to keep my enthusiasm contained within this area, but sometimes it means I have to wander, so I'm trying to keep it together. Hey, hi, I'm Joyce. I'm an entomologist. I love bugs. Not everyone does. It's okay if you don't. But I'm hoping that this talk will encourage you to actually have, if not a love for them, at least an appreciation for them by the time. Because one of the important things that we need to do in order to help conserve our pollinators is grow native plants. So what I'm going to talk about today is sort of a combination of both of those. I'm going to talk about our pollinators first, why they're important, why we love them, why I'm concerned, and actually most entomologists globally are concerned about them. And then what we can do as gardeners, as people who engage in our communities to help encourage the growth and well-being of our pollinators. So throughout this slide presentation, there will be pictures of some of our native pollinators in the area, as well as some of our native plants. So first question I have for you is, what are pollinators? What do our pollinators do? Does anyone want to? It's okay if you don't want to supply an answer, but if you do, that's good. I know, you didn't expect to get quizzed. That is basically what they do. They move pollen from plant to plant. They go from one plant to another. It's important that they're the same kind of plant. They go from one plant where they're like, oh yeah, and then they like rub pollen over the place. But then they move over to another plant and they're like, oh, and then they rub pollen all over that flower while they're rubbing pollen all over the plants. Now, they're not doing this to help the plant. The plant is incidental. They're doing this because that pollen is actually beneficial to them, usually to feed the babies. So the pollinators are there for the nectar from the plant, they're there for pollen from the plant, and the fact that they're pollinating that plant is not their goal, it is just, really cool to have. Now the thing is that our pollinators pollinate about 85% of flowering plants. So we need a lot of pollinators to pollinate all of those plants. And about 1 in 3 mouthfuls of food that you eat, assuming that you eat green vegetable-y things, I'm not going to judge. Some people don't. But if you eat green vegetable things, about 1 in 3 bites of food that you eat comes from a plant that is pollinated by some sort of pollinator. Now, when we think of pollinators, we generally think of things like butterflies and bees. Occasionally moths, if people are really into the ones with big wings. But we don't really think about the other guys. We don't really often think about the bats or the birds, which I'm not talking about today because I'm a bug person. But we also don't think about the fact that wasps are pollinators, mosquitoes are pollinators. So our pollinators are much more widely ranging than just butterflies and bees. Although, I do have a question for you. So that guy, the butterfly, is a checkered skipper, obviously. What's that other one? Looks like a honeybee, right? It's not. That's a fly. Flies are very important pollinators. This is a particular type of fly called hoverfly. Hoverflies look like bees, they look like wasps, they look like everything but a fly for the most part. It can be kind of tragic because you will often find books that are about like, look at the bees, and then it'll have flies inside, which is hilarious for me, but not so good for other people. The most tragic part, and the reason why I say it can be tragic, is that I met this very nice woman who had done this cross stitch. And if you've done cross stitch, you know it takes time. Who had done this beautiful cross stitch, very detailed, of what she thought was a bee on a flower. It wasn't. It was a fly. I didn't tell. She didn't. So we care about our pollinators in large part because they are important to ecosystems. They're important to our crops. They're important to our native plants. Our native plants are also really important to our pollinators. They are very closely connected. So when we talk about our pollinators, we talk about the concerns for them. So this year alone, as many of you know who really care for monarchs, you know that monarch populations are plummeting very strongly. But it's not just monarchs. It's butterflies, it's moths, it's bees, it's actually insects in general. So in 2017, some scientists in Germany published a paper that freaked out the world because it showed that the area where they studied, a natural area where they did their studies, had shown a 75% decrease in insects over the last 30 years. I'm not talking about numbers of species, I'm talking about insects in general. 75% fewer insects. And so the world freaked out. We heard all about the insect apocalypse. And some entomologists were like, wait, we don't know for sure. And then over the last 8 years, they've actually gone through and they've checked numbers globally. And they have found that globally, the range is about 45 to 75% fewer insects, including in our natural areas. Just this year, a paper was published showing that in the last 20 years alone, between 2020 and 2022, 2000 and 2020, I don't know, 2000 doesn't feel like 20 years ago, but in that time span, there has been a 22% decline in butterflies globally, particularly in the United States. And that means a decrease of about 1.3% of butterflies per year. We also see this in bees. There's been around 40% decrease over the last 20 years, and bee populations, with the strongest hit being bumblebees. Now, before we continue, I have to put this in. And that is, when I'm talking about bees, I'm not talking about honeybees. I'm talking about native bees. Honeybees are basically cattle. They are maintained by people, they are grown by people, they're cared for by people. So when I'm talking about the loss of bees, I'm talking about native bees. I'm talking about the little bright green metallic bees that you sometimes see on your flowers. I'm talking about bumblebees, the ones that are so cute and chubby that fall asleep in flowers. You can pet them if you're careful. I'm talking about our stingless bees. So I'm talking about these native bees, not honeybees. So yes, it's great that the honeybee is the saved bee symbol, but honeybees don't need to be saved. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of scientists working on that. We need to talk about our native bees. So, before I go on, this is a giant swallowtail, and by giant, I mean it's the size of my hand. They are one of the biggest butterflies in the United States. They are fabulous. They also grow on trees their caterpillars grow on trees that bite, so just be prepared. You decide to grow native plants. And by bite, I mean they have big thorns. And I have one and it bites me every time I try to come here. It's like, come here. Anyway, so how do we protect our pollinators? So one of the things I'm going to be talking about in a minute is some of the native plants that we can grow to protect our pollinators. And that is one of the biggest things, grow native plants. I know a lot of us are very concerned about our monarchs, so we want to grow the tropical milkweed. But the problem with the tropical milkweed is it keeps the monarchs here instead of migrating. So that actually leads to increases in their disease load, which is actually problematic for the monarch. It actually leads to decline in monarchs. So by growing our native milkweeds, by growing our native plants, we actually encourage the continued growth and success of our native pollinators. All the butterflies that we love, all the bees that we love, all the moths that we love. Now, gardening practices are also really important. For example, a lot of the time, people will put down weed barriers as they're trying to prepare their garden for the spring. That weed barrier prevents weeds growing through, and so there's less weeding that has to be done over the course of the year. Problem is that about 70% of our native bees are actually ground-dwelling bees, and they like to grow. They generally make their nests in areas that are fairly open, like sometimes in flower beds. So if you put down a weed barrier, those bees can't get out. When the young hatch, they also can't get out. So that actually significantly damages the native bees. One of the most important things that we can do is avoid pesticide use in the garden. Pesticides, I'm not just talking about insecticides. Let's take a moment to talk about insecticides. There's a very specific type of insecticide called neonicotinoid, also called Lumix. They're readily available at big box stores, on shelves. And the problem with these is that they are invariably deadly to bees. They are devastating to bees, but they're also devastating to all of our other pollinators. So if you buy your native plants, your pollinator plants at a big box store, you're likely going to be buying plants that have been soaked in these neonicotinoids, and it comes out in the nectar, it comes out in the pollen, and it also destroys any caterpillars that might go on. So look at the pesticides that you choose to use. Try to go for something more organic, more natural than some of these heavy-duty pesticides. But it's not just the insecticides, it's also the fungicides, it's also the herbicides. Because these they don't necessarily kill the insect, but they can make the solitary bee female confused. And if she can't get back to her nest, if she can't find her nest to feed the babies, then her babies. So minimizing the amount of pesticides we use in the environment is a very, very important part of preserving our pollinators. Also, there are two catchy phrases: leave the leaves, save the sticks. Leaving the leaves helps preserve moths. You might think, Joyce, moths. Really? Moths are actually some of our most important pollinators. They are as efficient at pollinating as bees are. They are very important for pollination. And we don't see them. We don't see them because they're nighttime things. Usually, I don't know about you, but at 9:30, I'm in bed with a book in my hand and asleep by 10 if I'm lucky. But those moths are out there and they're working all night and they're making sure that our native plants get pollinated. So if you can leave the leaves, do so. If you can't leave the leaves after they fall, what you can potentially do, use them for mulch. Don't chop them up. Just like scrape them against the base of trees or put them on top of your garden. And over the winter, they will actually degrade and generate all sorts of nutrients for your garden. So it actually helps your garden and also helps the moths that are hanging out in the leaves survive to the next generation, As for saving the sticks, the other 30% of our native pollinators that aren't ground-dwelling are generally what are called mason bees. They often dig little holes into the side of hollow stems of last year's plants. And so they'll lay their eggs in there and they'll hang out in there over winter. And so by leaving 8 to like 24 inches of stick from the previous year, from that fall actually helps our pollinators. You can trim it back to about a foot. That gives them plenty of room to grow and have babies. And then by the time your garden grows in the next year, it totally covers those sticks and you will never know they were there. But it helps our native bees tremendously. Now you might think, well, how do you know this? I know this partly because I'm a smart lady and I've got like a doctorate and whatever, who cares about that? I know this because I have my own pollinator where I've been doing these practices, and each year I get more and more and more new species of bees and butterflies that I hadn't seen in the garden previously. I've only had that pollinator garden for about 3 years. It's been through two hurricanes, and it is still bringing in all of these gorgeous native species. And I'm not talking about the big bees. I'm talking about also the little tiny bees, the ones that fit on the there are some species of bees that actually fit in a little circle in a zero. So there are lots of little tiny things you don't see that rely upon these pollinator gardens. Let's talk about what kind of plants we want to grow. So if you want to attract native bees, you want to attract you want to like plant flowers that are white or yellow or sometimes a totally blue, and you want them to be kind of flat. They might go into like medium fluted flowers or wide fluted flowers, but most of the time you want them to be kind of flat. So they can land, get all excited on the pollen, and fly away again. One of my favorites is actually pink, but I don't know if you've grown any sunshine mimosa. It has the little puffballs at the top. And my favorite thing to see is that bee in there going, oh yeah, look at that pollen, that's great. So when you find a bee, oftentimes you'll find them on yellow or white or pink flowers, and they'll usually flatten flowers, although they can have a little small throat to the flower. Now the thing about bees, our native bees, if you have the capability, provide them with nectar. A lot of our native wildflowers are great for that. We actually brought some pamphlets that are provided free by the Florida Wildflower Foundation about some of our native wildflowers that can be planted for our bees. But if you definitely have more space, one of the things you can do is provide them with nesting ground. This is some bare soil. If you want to know if there are native bees there, look for what look like little ant piles. So it'll be little piles of soil and little holes in the ground. And they look a little bit like an ant pile. And if you watch carefully, you'll see that rather than ants coming out of that, you'll have little adorable little bees. Like this little eastern bumblebee, which is also, but these guys form hives. The thing is, most of our native bees don't form hives. Most of our native bees are solitary. That one female is only going to care for her young. So most of our native bees are also not going to sting, because they would rather fly away rather than potentially be harmed by stinging you. So they're just leave, or they're just not stinging. We can also leave like little bundles of sticks, little bundles of rock in the garden, and that's also a good place for our bees to nest. If you're not comfortable leaving sticks in your garden, you can actually practice your hand at doing like little stick installations with like little sticks during things. Just go crazy and have fun with it. So that's our bees. That's how we would attract bees. If we want to attract butterflies, bee flowers are great for butterflies too. Butterflies generally will go to anything that has nectar. However, if you like more color in your garden, you might go for red or orange or one of those other colors, and that will generally attract butterflies. If you like more fluted flowers, ones like trumpet flowers and those sorts of things, those will also attract butterflies. So having a mixture of flat and fluted flowers and flowers of all sorts of different colors in the garden are really important for attracting all sorts of types of pollinators. The thing is though, if you want to have butterflies in your garden, you have to accept that you'll probably also have caterpillars in your garden. Now, not all caterpillars are butterflies, some are moths. And also I have to tell you, because otherwise I have a research student who will get upset with me. No, she's picky like that. Butterflies are basically fancy moths. They're like day-flying fancy moths. Or do I love them? They like little flying flowers. But the thing is that butterflies come from caterpillars. So if there are caterpillars in your garden, that's exciting. It's not, I mean, I understand if you might get upset, but it's more exciting than upsetting. Now, one of the funniest things I've ever heard anyone say to me is, Dr. Joyce, I would love to have this beautiful pollinator garden, but caterpillars keep eating my plants. How am I supposed to attract butterflies? So you want this to happen. You want this to be an ecosystem. You want it to be all sorts of little tiny bees and big butterflies and all sorts of moths. Let's talk a little bit about moths. Moths, there are some dayfly moths. For example, this is the wasp moth. The caterpillars feed on oleander as well as you have a desert rose, which neither of those are, oh, desert rose definitely not native. We may eat those soon. But they're beautiful moths. They're definitely pollinators. These are day flying. But most moths feed at night. They feed at night usually on white flowers or very pale colored flowers. If you have a white flower that has a significant scent to it, that is probably moth pollinated. So with our moths, they are important pollinators, but we don't really think. There's this really cool concept of the moon garden, where you actually put in flowers that are meant specifically for moths. And it's basically just like white flowers or very pale yellow flowers that bloom at night. And that means you have to stay up a little later or maybe get up a little earlier to enjoy it yourself, but it is really great for moths. But remember, the moths are the ones that are going to overwinter in the leaves. The bees are the ones that are going to overwinter in the sticks. This is true for here. It's true for any other state that you may live in, even if it's just part of the year. All of these things are happening throughout the United States. So wherever you live, these are things to keep in mind. So these are the three main pollinators that you can concentrate on: the bees, the butterflies, the moths. And if you put in plants that encourage the growth of these organisms, it also brings in other things. It brings in other insects that can benefit from your garden. It brings in things like ladybugs and other beetles that might be potential aphids. If you have problems with aphids, keep in mind that they're a natural part of the environment. Aphids on milkweed are actually often eaten by the monarch caterpillars as they go through and just eat whatever's in the area. But they're also really important for little tiny parasitic wasps that actually use those aphids for reproduction. So the idea with any sort of garden is, rather than trying to keep your pest species at zero, just try to keep it low. Those pest species are eaten by other things. And by having your pest species at low rather than zero, it really encourages your garden to grow. It encourages all sorts of insects to survive. And this is part of the pollinator garden mindset. You'll start with like, I just want to grow some pollinators. And then eventually you'll be like, hey, this bug is cool too. What about this? And then eventually you discover that you have an ecosystem that brings in birds. How many of you like songbirds? It takes over 10,000 caterpillars to raise a bunch of songbirds. So if you really want to encourage birds in your garden, one, give them birdseed, because a lot of our songbirds are seabirds, but they feed their babies caterpillars and other insects. So the last thing you want to do is poison those caterpillars and then poison the baby birds. So there are all sorts of reasons to have lots of pollinators in your garden. But what can we grow to do? What are some good native plants for that? So there are some major groups of plants that you should consider including in a garden. If you want to have a pollinator garden, or if you just want to have a garden that encourages the growth of our insects here in Florida. One of the things you want to have are wildflowers. The wildflowers are really important for nectar. They're really important for pollen. So some great ones are things like the Florida seed tick, also known as tick seed, also known as coreopsis. We have a couple of native species of coreopsis in the area, so you can see that. So the pointer works. You can see that. The one at the bottom, that side, left and right are not my favorites. My husband's sitting in the back. I cannot tell you how many times I've told that man to go left when he needed to go right, and he doesn't trust me anymore. He's like, is it my side of the car or is it your side of the car? So, point being, bottom of that side is one of our species of Coreopsis. We also have one that's yellow with a yellow center. They grow about this tall. They're beautiful little flowers. They reseed themselves very easily, so you can just, in the spring, just transplant them back into the garden or transplant them to the area of the garden. The same is true for Rudbeckia or Black-eyed Susan, which is in the upper corner. Black-eyed Susan is really great for bees. I've seen little tiny butterflies on it. It's really great for pollinators. Black-eyed Susan has a tendency towards aphids, but the great thing about them is that if you just get a hose and just spray the aphids off, it keeps the number of aphids low, and Black-eyed Susan does fabulous. We also have tropical sage, which is the one that's all the way to this side. And we have 3 different color varieties that are found in Florida. There's the scarlet sage, which is the one you see, bright red, fleeted flower. I've seen butterflies on that. I've seen bees crawl into that. So bees are all about it as well. There's a white variety, and it's not common to find, but there's also a pink variety. And sometimes you'll plant a white or pink variety, and next year's seed will come up with pink. It'll be weird. It's fine. Oh, good. It's all beautiful flowers. And then we have the spotted bee balm, which is also called dotted horseman. It actually is really great for bees, all different bee sizes. Will climb up into those flowers and they'll pick up pollen and they'll drink down nectar and they'll pollinate themselves. Now, I have heard rumors that the bee balm can go a little crazy in the garden, but it just needs a little tending and a little care, and that'll keep it very well compacted. I say heard rumors because the 2 times that I've tried to grow bee balm, and I will try again, it did not go well because my garden is in the middle of a condo association, and sometimes gardeners need the gardeners that take care of other people's places and would ask them not to touch mine. Get a little too enthusiastic with the spray, and they're like, "Oh, this is obviously a weed," and then the next thing you know, I'm at the house crying. It's like, anyway. So, in addition to wildflowers, surprisingly, you'll also want to grow grasses. So this is a Ceram's blue. When they close their wings, they are sort of gray with little spots on their back wing. They are maybe 3/4 of an inch in size. Tiny little butterflies, beautiful little butterflies. The Ceram's blue, as well as a lot of our other smaller butterflies and bees, actually like to rest occasionally. And where do they rest? They rest in grasses. Now we have some really, really pretty native grasses here in Florida that work very well in the garden. These include mollygrass. If you've ever been driving around and you've seen those pink-topped grasses, that's mollygrass. It is a beautiful addition. It's nice and pink at certain times of the year, and the rest of the year it's a great place for butterflies and bees to rest. Fakahatchee grass, not as pretty as the mollygrass, but it does have these little dangly stamen that is like floating in the wind. It's really kind of cute when I pinch its little grass cheeks. But one of my favorites is actually Elliott's lovegrass, which is a little bit of a lower growing grass, but it produces these like flamboyant stalks of seeds. That just like I don't know, you walk up to it, it goes ta-da, and it's fantastic. Also, it's sort of this like light sagey blue that's kind of an unusual color to find in the garden. And all of these grow really well in most of your native plant gardens, and they provide a showy effect at certain times of the year, and the rest of the time of the year they also provide resting places for a lot of our insects. Now, in addition to wildflowers and grasses, you'll also want to grow some vines and shrubs and small trees. Now, most of the vines and shrubs and small trees, or big trees, really big trees, that I'm recommending because they are host plants for various butterflies. A great example of that is the passion flower. Now, I don't know anyone who doesn't love passion flower. Most of the time they're giant purple. We actually have a native giant purple passion flower here in Florida. We also have another passion flower here in Florida called the porky stem passion vine, which has little tiny green flowers. But regardless of what kind it is, it's actually a host plant to 3 different species of butterflies, including our native Florida state butterfly. Which, sorry, I'm going to go back a little bit. Hold on. This guy, zebra longwing. So they are host plants for the zebra longwing. This passion flower vine is a host plant also for, this is a zebra longwing caterpillar. It looks scary, right? With all those spikes. It's not venomous, it's not going to harm you. And also, if you look it in the face, you'll discover that it has an adorable face that only a mother or an entomologist can love. Which, you know, I totally do. I'm like, look at the face on that thing. Anyway, but also the Gulf fritillary, if you like Gulf fritillaries, they feed on passion vines. There's also another one that's a little more unusual to find, and that's the dune, which looks a lot like the Gulf fritillary, but it's almost solid. All of them grow on passion vines. So if you want to grow a passion vine to grow beautiful flowers, I will warn you, if you want to grow a passion vine to grow these caterpillars, grow the corky stem. It refreshes itself very easily. You don't have to be devastated by lack of flowers. And you will find, okay, I'm going to say it, adorable caterpillars on it. Your mileage may vary, but I am who I am. Now, here's the thing. If you want to grow passion flower vines for insects, don't grow the red ones. Red ones are actually poisonous. So if you come across a passion flower that you want to grow and it's obvious that it has red flowers, it's actually poisonous to the caterpillars. So they won't survive. Also, I found, now this is just anecdotal, I've just seen this myself, I've actually seen bees feeding on the red ones and they actually get confused and they may actually get stuck in the flower. So just avoid the red bees if you can and try to find one of our native. Now, bushes are really great. Now, the texture bushes I'm going to recommend are actually mostly just for the actual pollinator insects. So for them to feed on nectar and get pollen, but the last one is actually it's a food source as well as a pollen. So how many of you are familiar with firebush? Love me firebush. Actually, I got into pollinator gardening because of firebush. We were looking to buy a place. There's a giant firebush in the yard. It's covered in zebra longwings. I told my husband this is not going to affect my decision. Don't tell him I lied. But so firebush is an amazing pollinator plant, particularly for butterflies, but also if you like hummingbirds. Hummingbirds love firebush. There are other pollinators that actually get nectar from the pollen from the firebush. I see tons of bees on them, including not only honeybees, but also our native bees. I've seen tons of like the little teeny green and yellow sweat bees all over my firebush. The thing you need to keep in mind is the fact that there is a native firebush and there is a non-native firebush. Native and non-native firebushes will actually cross-pollinate with each other and make a hybrid that doesn't do very well, but you want to try to stick with the native. Although the non-native is also pretty, but the native will have red flowers, like generally solid red flowers. If you're not sure if it's native, if you're in a native plant garden, usually they should be, or a native plant nursery, they should be able to tell you if it's native. But if it has red flowers, you can be pretty sure that it's native. If it has yellow or orange flowers, like you see in that bottom corner, it's not. So, they actually have a tendency to escape the garden and can take over ecosystems a little bit. So you want to try to stick with the native one in case it does actually escape the garden. So that way you know that you're not encouraging non-native species. There isn't really anything about the non-native that's harmful for pollinators. It's still perfectly fine for pollinators, but it's not as good for the ecosystem as the native ones. All right, and then we have the gray leaf tea bush. Now, I put a picture of the gray leaf tea bush up there, but it basically looks like a major fabulous thing about the gradient tea bush, other than the fact that it is a kind of grayish green. There's sort of like a grayish sage color. One of the great things about it is that it has, if you like the look of a weeping willow with that flowing sort of look, it actually has a very similar aspect to it. It grows up and then it just sort of leans over to the side. It's like, I'm tired. And so it has that beautiful sage green leaves. It has that lovely weeping aspect, but it also is covered in those little purple flowers. Bees love those little purple flowers. I have never gone up to a bird leaf tea bush and not seen it covered in bees. So it's a beautiful plant for a native plant garden. It is a beautiful plant for encouraging pollinators. All right. And the last plant I'm going to talk about is the senna. So senna is also referred to as cassia. I think there's been some juggling with the name occasionally, so it's usually referred to as one or both. Now, the senna also has certain species also have sort of a weeping aspect. Some can actually be grown into trees. It really depends on how much effort you want to put into a plant. Most of the time, they sort of have a weeping aspect. But they are covered in these beautiful yellow flowers, which are great for pollinators, especially pollinators that have the capability of shaking it up a little bit to make it release a little bit more pollen. Because some of them will fly up to it and go buzz, 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 and that actually will cause it to release more pollen, and then they fill up more pollen. Usually these are some of our favorite bees. The reason why I want to encourage you to consider this plant is that it is both a pollinator plant and it's also the host plant for sulfur butterflies. So if you like those beautiful big yellow butterflies, this is a host plant. And they will grow on that plant. Some of them eat the flowers, some of them eat the leaves, depending on the species, but they are, these plants are really great for these butterflies. Yep, both varieties are host and flowering. Now, a lot of these plants, you can find more information about them in the 30 Wildflower booklet that's provided. I mean, if you lose yours, you can find it on the Florida Wildflower Foundation website. And there's also a bee pamphlet over there for what plants you can plant to encourage bees. So, and there's one that comes from the Xerces Society that is about native plants that are important for Florida and encourages growth of bees and butterflies. All right. Do you have time for questions?
Thank you. You were talking about those flies that resembled honeybees, and then you were talking about declining population variety of insects. Are they one of them?
Everything.
Are they just down south?
Oh no, so hoverflies are pretty much, they're found pretty much worldwide, just different species of them. All insects are different. So it's not just pollinators, it's all insects. So if you have that question about any insect, the answer is always yes.
One more question. You said the giant swallowtail was on a tree with thorns. Was that the wild lime?
That's the wild lime. Okay. So the giant, one of the host plants for the giant swallowtail, there is actually a root plant that grow on as well. But one of the major host plants for the giant swallowtail is also the pollinator plant, because when it blooms, it blooms a lot of colors, is the wild lime, which has, there's no other way to put it, hella thorns on it. So whenever I go anywhere near the wild lime, it grabs onto me with those thorns, and it's like, listen, you planted me, you asked. So it's kind of neat, but I love it. So, all right, there's a question. All right, so there are a couple of native plant nurseries in the area, not that close to here, but in the area of the road, this Apache. There is All Native, which is by H. Village. There is also one called Washburn, which is in Buckingham. Those are the two major ones I know in this area. You're feeling up for an adventure. Wilcox Nursery in Nisbonville, basically it's somewhere in St. Louis area. Also has really good sources of plants that we normally can't find in this area and out of Largo. Yeah, so just think safety, just like Wilcox Nursery and safety. And they have things, they often have things like ironweed and some other things you normally don't get in the nurseries, but are really great for pollinators. Also, both the Florida Native Plant Society as well as the Nursery Society often have lists of native plant nurseries in the local area.
We get a chance to talk to them.
Not as much as I would like, no. So, the problem with speaking with landscapers is that most of the time, if they're planting natives, they're planting non-flowering natives. So they're going to plant things like sea graves, they're going to plant things like Roba, and they're going to plant things that don't really produce flowers for natives. Part of the reason for that is that I won't say sometimes, but that's a lie. Regularly, natives escape the garden. And so a lot of landscapers are actually taught with the native plants. Like the fact that Spanish needles, which I didn't talk about because people have a love-hate relationship with it, never stays where you put it. And it will go everywhere. Is it one of our most important pollinator plants in Florida? It absolutely is. Because lots of things feed on Spanish needles. But they escape the garden. And so landscapers are looking to plant things that are not going to escape the garden, that are going to stay where they put them, and don't have to worry about seedlings in the next a lot of the time. So it's an uphill battle with a lot of these things. Sorry, what's that? All right, so Macadamia aren't native. As far as I know, they occasionally attract bees. I've actually had some of the native bees actually fall asleep in the flowers of mine, which is obviously the cutest thing ever. But they don't actually add as much to the pollinator garden as they just. If you're interested in fluted flowers, I would recommend. There are, I remember the name of it. There are a couple of species of basically flower vines in Florida that have fungal flowers. I think they're listed in there. If not, then they become Florida Native Plant Society. So, I mean, they're not like quite like innovative but they are still. All those.
They have really pink flowers.
Actually, Portobello's native.
I don't know if it's native, but it's loaded with beans.
So, if they're not escaping the garden, there are a lot of what are called Florida friendly species. So, if it's not escaping, by escaping the garden, I mean like putting down seeds and then spreading everywhere. If it's a Florida friendly species, that means it's probably not, it may or may not be native, but it's not trying to take over habitats. So if it's a pollinator plant, if it's a plant with pollinators really love, that is Florida friendly, then that does have a place in your pollinator garden. Just keep an eye out for spread.
Just want to mention that.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. It's like Tuesdays and Sundays, right?
Okay, Tuesdays and Sundays.
Oh, that's awesome. Do they have I actually haven't been to that one. Do they have a good variety?
Yeah. It varies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I take those at
That's great. It's like river or something preserved.
It's called river oaks.
Yeah.
But the way we address is local chat.
And I think they have like a Facebook page and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. They get to be about 8 feet if you give them enough space for that. You can also turn them to smaller. So like a lot of our native plants, you can actually potentially integrate opposites and pollinators. You can trim them to a smaller size. They'll take a little more work, but if you just give them room to grow, they'll get to know. The other great thing about native plants, and one of the reasons why we might consider putting them in landscaping, is that they don't need as much care. You generally don't need as much pesticide. They don't need as much water once they're established. They are meant to grow in the environment that they're in. So that's how they've always grown. It's in the environment that we're in. So they are really great plants for low maintenance, low plants. That's that low growing one with little white flowers. So we actually do have some non-natives that are also host plants for moths or even non-native butterflies. So for example, there's a huge plant that made its way up into Florida, I think through Cuba, and then that actually dragged the mountain butterfly up into Florida. So now we have and they feed on also weirdly enough, in addition to that green shrimp. They also feed on something called Mexican petunia, that horrible invasive that we have that so many people know because it's so easy to stuff. They will occasionally feed on that as well. So, but yeah, so sometimes bringing in those plants also brings in other interesting insect species.
Species native to they're very hard to insects. Do you have any sense for how that is so any way to change that and just not grow here?
So part of the problem is that some of our native plants, the ones that aren't easily available, either there aren't enough individuals in the wild to comfortably harvest seed from them without damaging their populations. The other issue is that sometimes they're just hard to grow in a nursery setting. So sometimes you're able to get seed if you can get them from reputable dealers. Sometimes you can get seed from some of those species, but a lot of the time it's either difficult to grow in nurseries because it has very specific requirements, or the nursery isn't able to meet those requirements, or it's just that by trying to harvest them, it can change natural ecosystems or versions. Populations, that's the word, populations. Also, I think that,
I was about to say that's a perfect transition. So if you have any more questions, I'm going to ask you to hold them until the end. Joyce is going to stick around, so she will be here afterwards if you have more questions. But I'm actually going to introduce our next speaker, which is Chad Washburn. So Chad is the Vice President of Conservation at Naples Botanical Garden and the Center for Nature-Based Solutions at Naples Botanical Garden. He is responsible for the development of the garden's plant conservation strategy and implementation of the program. He leads the conservation and natural resources team, focusing on projects that ensure the long-term survival of the flora and ecosystems of South Florida and the Caribbean region through integrated plant conservation efforts, which include natural resource management, seed banking, conservation plant collections, development, threat assessments, restoration and resiliency projects, and capacity building in the region. Throughout his time at the garden, he has led efforts to address the region's most pressing challenges through nature-based solutions, including restoration of coastal beach dune plant communities, development of resilient urban forests, and stormwater management. Just some of what he's going to talk about today.
Right. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for coming. We're going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to pull back and we're going to talk about native landscapes on a large scale. And as we go, I'll talk about a couple different areas. One is our coastal ecosystems. You can imagine our coastal ecosystems are one of our most threatened ecosystems. But I want to kind of share why those are important with you, talk about some of the things that we can do, and we'll talk about stormwater, and then we'll also talk about the urban forest. But when we get to the end, I've got some resources that I can share with you all that will be valuable for you in your own home and things that you, if you want to make changes to your own landscaping. one of the things I also want to do is, at the end of this, encourage you all to be advocates for native plants. And we've kind of shifted how we work with native plants a little bit at the garden, and I'll explain that as we go a little bit. But I've taken several other lectures and kind of put them together for this. Let's see. So I live in a community. This is not my community, but it might as well be. I should switch this photo out for the one from my community. How many of you have stormwater ponds in your neighborhoods? Almost every, pretty much every. This is what the stormwater pond in my neighborhood looks like. There are, according to Dr. Serge Thomas at Florida Gulf Coast University, there are over 10,000 stormwater ponds in Collier County. If you look at Lee County, there's another 10,000 stormwater ponds. Stormwater infrastructure in South Florida is designed to prevent flooding. It's designed for that purpose, to reduce the flooding. It's designed to move water quickly, hold it in these ponds, and then get it out as soon as it reaches a certain elevation, get it out to the Gulf. That's a problem. Flooding is just one issue that this stormwater system should be dealing with. It should actually also be dealing with one of our other biggest issues is nutrient pollution. And that's a problem because if you've been to the beach during red tide, you know that it's hard to breathe. The beaches are, I'll talk about this throughout, you'll hear, notice me pepper this throughout. Beaches are the economic engine of our region, really are the reason most of us are here. There's the basis of our tourism economy. And that starts here in our own backyards. So, someone's FaceTiming. But this is what most of our stormwater ponds look like, grass right down to the edge. What happens when we have a stormwater pond that looks like this? We mow this area and the grass ends up in the body of water, and our stormwater ponds end up polluting the Gulf even more. And that's because grass clippings contain nitrogen and phosphorus. They also are organic material like carbon, and when that decomposes, it removes oxygen from the water column. And all of the phosphorus that's in the bottom of that lake that's been trapped over the years in the sediments are released. And then we get an algal bloom when that decomposes. So, but this doesn't have to be the way things are. We can make a change. This is another issue with our stormwater ponds. This one is actually in Naples. This is in my parents' community. This is a stormwater pond that we've got a fountain in the middle. So during the dry season, you're blowing water up into the air, it's evaporating. And they also draw from this irrigation. They're losing water, and you get what I call rain around the tub. So not only do you have grass right down to the edge, where the water used to be, you've got this brown ring, and now the landscapers go through and they're treating for weeds, so they're spraying in this. So we can hide this. Most of our ponds go up and down throughout portions of the year, but we can hide that with plants. This is my own doing. This is not my backyard. It's not on the waterfront. I'm a gardener. I don't make enough to be on the water side. But grass right down to the edge. And I've gone out several times when this is mown and there's grass in the water. The other thing that happens is landscapers, some people mow their own yards and take care of their own. Some of them have a landscaper. There's 100 houses on my community. That's 100 different people taking care of the landscape around this lake. That requires that all 100 people be trained to know that you don't fertilize within, I think the rule in Collier County is 10 feet. Don't fertilize within that. But when they're out fertilizing and you don't know that that buffer is there, we're relying on all 100 people to know that that's not legal to fertilize within that buffer zone. You see grass right down to the edge, and the thought is just fertilize my lawn. So fertilizer that goes into these ponds, that's pollution that goes right into our stormwater systems. That's blue-green algae in freshwater, and that's red tide in the coast. But it doesn't have to be that way. In the back, there's some packets over here that have a ghost orchid picture on them. There's a bunch of information in there about Naples Botanical Garden and nature-based solutions. But I've been here in Southwest Florida for 18, going on 19 years. And for most of that time, the garden has partnered with Rookery Bay and several other partners to do Greenscape Alliance, so Project Greenscapes. And this is a group of local agencies and organizations that are working to make change in how we manage stormwater and to make change in pollution. That's changes in how we manage our landscapes, but that's also changes in how we manage our aquatic areas. We had an opportunity to do something really different at the garden. When we built the garden, our stormwater lakes were planted with native plants. We've since let some of those go. If it's on the preserve side, we've let that become a little bit more wild. But we have some areas that are more formal. Those are opportunities for education, for you to come see. Because people want to see this. If you're advertising this, we need to do this in our communities. So if we plant the littoral zone, which is that transitional area from water up the bank, and we plant a buffer, what does that do for stormwater? Well, it does several things. One, when we fertilize, that acts as a visual barrier. We know it's not turf grass. Fertilize down to that and stop. It also acts, those plants act to help hold that bank. If you go back a couple slides and you know that erosion, those plants that are in the water and on the bank, when you get, that erosion comes from internal waves. When you get water lapping on the edge of the bank, it erodes that. Over time, it can take 10, 20, 30 feet of your yard, and I've seen that happen in Florida, and it moves that dirt into the lake. Your lake gets shallower. It costs millions of dollars to dig that lake back out and make it deeper again, have that holding capacity. You're losing land. This helps to reduce sediments going into the water. Those sediments can be pollutants into the water column. It helps to act as a buffer for fertilizer, as I mentioned. Plants uptake nutrients. So by having this living buffer in the lake and around the lake, it helps to remove nutrients from the water column. A lot of people ask, do I need to cut the plants then and remove that? No, you don't have to do that. Those plants will help hold that in that organic matter. And when that it takes a long time for that to decompose. So it helps hold it. And when it does decompose, those plants take it right back up again. So native plants are a really important part. And if you think about your pond, the pond in my community holds several million gallons. That's a large lake. It holds several million gallons of water. If our stormwater system now, and if you have just a couple lakes, that's a lot of water that's being potentially treated in your community. Those lakes can do one of two things. They can serve to reduce pollutants by all of the things that I've talked about here, or they can be sources for pollutants. When that water quickly goes into those and flows right out to the Gulf, our stormwater ponds can be sources of pollution. So really great opportunity to make a major impact. And if you're one homeowner and you can go to your HOA association board and ask for change, get that to change, one person can make a huge difference. One person in my neighborhood, it wasn't me. I had been talking about it for years, and one person on our board said, we are gonna do this. Our lake is getting shallower. We're going to invest in this. So my own community is investing in this, in planting the lake all the way around our community. So that's a lot of change. That's millions of gallons of stormwater that can be cleaned just by one person making that change. So it's not enough to just say we need to do this. We have to have a place where people can come to see this. We need to have a place where landscape architects can come to see this. So one of the things that we've done recently at the garden, we had an opportunity to take a new swale. The county added parking along Hamilton Drive for boats. And when they add impervious surface, they add asphalt. They have to be able to take that water somewhere, that extra volume of water. And the first option was to put that in a drain pipe right on the asphalt, go into a pipe, go underground, and go out to the Gulf. And that's not a very good solution. That's adding pollution right out to the Gulf. What we proposed is, hey, that's fresh water. Fresh water is a resource. We'll take that. So we created this swale at the garden. We planted this. You can see these are all native plants. This was planting day. That's what it looked like about 9 months later. That's an ecosystem. We created native habitat. That area. This is a swale that water moves through, but this would be the same kind of thing that you would do along your lake banks. It also provides great habitat for fish, for insects, for pollinators, for all of those other things. So this is what that looks like now. It's an ecosystem. If you didn't know that we planted that 9 months before this, I'm an ecologist. I would go out there and see this and not know. So that's pretty incredible. This is an aerial view of what that looks like. It's gorgeous. We had somebody come out who was doing a major golf course in Florida, and they had been using all of these structures to do some stormwater stuff. And they came out and they saw this and said, okay, no, we're scrapping what we're doing and we're going to move to this. So this is a nature-based solution. So we're using nature and ecology to this is not just an environmental project. This is an economic project. This is a project that impacts people because there are 35,000 jobs in Collier County. This is the 2024 tourism report. 35,000 jobs that rely on tourism. It's $2.9 billion in tourism dollars per year that tourism brings in, invests in Collier County. That's a huge number of people and their families that come with them. That's a huge dollar value. And if we have red tide and we can't have tourism, then that's 30,000 people and their families. That impacts their livelihoods. That $2.9 billion, that impacts that economic input into our community. So this is not just an environmental project. This is an economic project, and this is a social project that impacts everybody in our community. So, key takeaways. This is what stormwater systems can look like. This is the stormwater pond at Naples Botanical Garden. Planted with native plants. We've got that upland buffer. We've got, you can see the lower section. That's of the plants that are emergent plants that are growing out of the water. We don't get erosion. Erosion is, there's no erosion in this area because we have this great buffer of plants. 10,000 opportunities. 10,000 stormwater ponds in Collier County, and very, very few of them have this literal buffer. So great opportunity to use native plants. I threw this slide in just because it's a little bit of a shift from stormwater ponds, but I thought that this was important. This is something that I'm noticing more and more. Not only is it important that we do our ponds, treat our ponds like an ecosystem, we also need to look at areas in our parks, areas in our communities. We recently, if anybody was here for any of the last hurricanes, we get storm surge. We get a lot of rain. We get flooding across the landscape now. We have sea level rise. We're getting what's called sunny day flooding in areas where we have high tides in our communities. We need to deal with water. We need to deal with this excess of water. We need to treat this water. So one of the opportunities that we have that's a nature-based solution using native plants is to look at our parks. Our parks can be places, and this is a park in Boston where they've done this along the coast. It's been designed to be a place where people can come and use the land, use this space. It's an open park, but it has areas that are planted with native plants that will take salt water and they can flood for part of the year when we do have these storms or high tides or these events. And that'll hold that water. So Naples Botanical Garden is one of the top birding hotspots in Collier County. We get 250,000 visitors a year. The area that is one of the best birding spots is our natural areas. We have 90 acres of natural land. This past year when we had hurricanes, Milton brought at least 1 foot of storm surge across that 90 acres. That's 30 million gallons of stormwater that did not go into the community, that did not flood the community. What's the economic impact of keeping 30 million gallons of storm surge out of our community? That's huge. That protected the community. 362 days of the year, that area is one of the top birding hotspots. It's a public place where people go. It's useful to the community. So this is not putting land aside that no one can use. It provides economic input to the community. It has use. It has tourism uses. So we should really be looking at all of our green spaces around our community and looking to see, can we transform them from just grass into something that can be a floodable space like this. Now, I'm going to say this is not technically part of this lecture, but I'm going to say this because I think it's something important. At the bottom here, I've got this timeline. It's 2025 now. It can take 10 years to plan, design, permit, fund, and construct any major infrastructure project. That's like a park or a major interchange, bridges, our major coastal infrastructure. That puts us out to 2035. Say you give a major infrastructure project like that a 50-year lifespan, puts us out to 2085. Yeah, that's a lot to think about. What is sea level rise going to look like in 2085? What are storms and hurricanes going to look like in 2085? So as we plan in our communities, we need to look at what will South Florida look like in 2085. So I know this is bigger than your backyard, but talking about stormwater, we can make these changes in our stormwater plans. One person can go to their community and make these changes. And that's a huge impact on water. So next I'm gonna shift gears, I think, here a little bit. One thing that's in that, in the handouts that we've got there, we've got a Protecting Water with Plants, a how-to guide for Southwest Florida homeowners. There's a lot of plant lists out there on what to plant around your ponds. I've been doing this for 18 years and I disagree with 99% of those plant lists because they'll tell you to plant things that pickerel weed is always the top plant on those lists. And pickerel weed never grows for more than a year. It does not stay, it's not a great option. So that guide has the plants that are the workhorse plant species that we feel really confident in that will actually perform really well.
Chad, I just want to know where all those native plants are coming from. You can't grow them all at the garden. I mean, you're growing for the dune restoration up to Tampa. But what about all the stormwater, 10,000 lakes? Where are we going to get the native plants from? We can't even find tick seed in the nursery unless you go to Sweden. So
when you're buying plants on the scale of 100,000 plants at a time for stormwater, there are actually several large nurseries that grow plants specifically for stormwater. And if you're planting, we have, I think, 2.5 miles of shoreline at the garden. There are nurseries that grow plants in that quantity. That wouldn't be something that you wouldn't go to all natives for. You would go to these big nurseries, and they're growing all of the plants that are on the list that I provide. They're growing those. So that's a commercial scale. So that's important. And I'm talking about this in big picture because it is important. And when I talk about the beach dunes, it's important. If we want to make these changes and make these shifts, we've found that the best way to make shifts in what nursery growers grow and what landscape architects spec is to make big changes on the big scale, the urban forest. Because if nurseries start growing that and they see that we need 10,000 of them, they'll start to grow them. Then the smaller nurseries have more access to that material. And then us as homeowners can get that plant material. When we go to a nursery and we say, you might have 10, 20 people ask for this plant, they're going to handle a few, but we're trying to make these big shifts, these major changes in how everything is done. This is also available online, and there's a code there you can scan with your phone, and that'll take you to this. I don't know if it's close enough that you can do that from your phone, but that'll take you to this. But this is also available in the package. Yeah. Yeah.
So all the plants he's talking about, mounds and the tourism and these ponds, they help not only with maintenance of pond pollution, but I don't know if any of you have experienced midge outbreaks because of the ponds in your area in the past 4 or 5 years. So midges are they're also called blind mosquitoes. So they're like the mosquitoes with fluffy antenna that they don't actually bite. Part of the reason why we're having these midge outbreaks, these extreme outbreaks in these systems, is because they grow in these ponds, these organic leaves and stuff. They get dumped into the pond and then used by these little fly larvae that then come out in explosive numbers, which then leads to pesticides being pumped into the water to
healthy ecosystems? Healthy ecosystems typically have a balance. So the question was, what would the typical cost be to do this? It really depends on the company that you use. My community got 4 or 5 quotes, and the number differences were huge. So it really depends. My community just decided to do the littorals. They didn't do the buffer. I would recommend doing both the littorals and the buffer. You're reducing the area, this upland buffer. You're not mowing that, you're not fertilizing that. That can actually help reduce the area of land that you're putting into maintenance. Yeah, so treating algal blooms in the lake, they use the product typically called copper sulfate. Copper sulfate is toxic to benthic life in the pond. It's toxic to a lot of things, but it's like a drug habit. Once you put that in, the algae dies, sinks to the bottom, decomposes. When it decomposes, it removes oxygen from the water column. When there's no oxygen in the water column, phosphorus is released from the sediments. You get internal phosphorus loading or phosphorus bomb. Then you get an algal bloom. Then So if our ponds were done this way from the beginning, it would significantly lengthen the time, the lifespan of our ponds. A pond does have a lifespan as a stormwater system over time. But I'm going to shift gears now and go into beach dunes. So I guess I kind of want to start. What is a beach dune? A beach dune is a flexible barrier along our coast. When I say flexible, it's because it's a dynamic ecosystem. This ecosystem is shifting and changing over time. If you look at, I did a presentation this morning, we looked at a beach dune at Barefoot Beach, and it shifts. I had aerial photos, and you can see it move and shift over time. It does that as water levels go up and down, and as we have storms. But it's a barrier because it's formed when something traps sand. What that something is plants. So wind-blown sand blows down the beach, and plants trap that. This is an example of that here. This is one of our great native beach dune plants. It traps 2 feet of sand, and it did that over a 12-hour period during one storm. Were you maybe? I don't remember which storm. But this traps 2 feet of sand. Sand is really expensive. We spent $4.9 million. This is $4.9 million since 1996 putting sand on the beaches. We never should see. That plant formed a 2-foot-tall dune for a 12-hour period. Trapped sand. So a dune is formed when plants trap sand, and they help to consolidate that and keep it in place through their roots. But that's a flexible barrier. So when we do have storms, you get erosion. I have a photo later on of erosion. So a beach dune is both protective, it helps prevent damage from wave energy into our community. It's also resilient. Resilient means it's able to come back on its own afterwards in some form. If it's incredibly damaged, we might get a little bit of regrowth. On a day-to-day storm or an unnamed storm, though, we need that resiliency. Because remember, our tourism is our economy. All those jobs are relying on that, economic input. The number one thing that people say they come here for, 50% of the respondents to the tourism survey come to the beach. Golf is 7%. That tells you how important beach dunes are. So that's a plant forming a beach dune. This is an area, this is one of my favorite fishing spots. I won't give away where it's at. It's good fishing spot. It's on one of the outlying islands. So this, let's see. There's 2 plants in this location. This is a dune that's about 1 year old. That flexible barrier, that dune formed over about 1 year period. My son and I go out to this island and fish, and this was an open waterway, and about a year later, suddenly we had this dune. Well, there's 2 plant species there. These 2 plant species are pioneer plant species, meaning they're the first plant to come in after a disturbance or come in early and form an ecosystem. They are Susubium portulicastrum or sea purslane, and the other one is I think it's Paspalum vaginatum. It's a small running grass. So these two plants have formed this ecosystem. And what they do is a little bit of plant material, sometimes just a little piece this big, can take root and start to form a dune, and it traps seeds of other plants blowing down the beach, and it forms this. This was at the Mucky Duck. This was after an unnamed storm. Not a named hurricane, just an unnamed storm. That's erosion. It's about a 3-foot tall drop off. And when I saw this, when I first got out there, I thought, oh God, this is devastating. This looks terrible. You know, it's destroyed this dune. And as I've come to understand dunes, it's not destroyed that dune. That dune protected the area behind it because the water did not get to the built infrastructure. So that dune protected that. These plants are adapted to this. Those plants that held in place, you can see their roots, those plants are just going to cover that and they'll recover fairly quickly. Again, healthy ecosystem. We have those early pioneer plant species that are in here. There's a couple that will grow really quickly. So they'll cover this area really quickly. I mentioned all it takes sometimes is one little plant to form an entire dune ecosystem. This is one of those. This is sea purslane. One tiny little plant. It's related, if you grow portulaca, this is related to portulaca. This is a little native plant. One tiny little piece probably landed in this spot and rooted in. It's formed its own dune. This is a cute baby dune. That will become an ecosystem given enough time. But you can see one little tiny plant, what it's done is to entrap in sand. That plant not only traps sand, it consolidates moving sand. So if we have no plants, that sand is free to just blow around or wash around. If it's stabilized and we get one tiny little plant like that and it stabilizes it, it also catches seeds of other plants blowing down the beach. And this is that same plant, purslane, and it's trapped some grass seeds and it's formed an ecosystem. Over time, this will grow and have more species. If there's more species nearby, they have a seedling to feed into this. So what else can plants, what are some of the other functions that plants have? We talked about those early pioneer species that grow really quickly and help stabilize sand. We also have plants that are kind of like the redwood forest trees. In the past, when we've restored beach dunes, we plant seals. That's it. Sometimes we plant sea grapes. We plant 2 species. We're planting like the redwood forest trees. But a forest of just those trees is not a forest. We have all of these other layers. We have the canopy, but we have all of these other layers. We have shrubs. We have ground cover. We have vines in a forest. A forest is an ecosystem of several different species. So just besides seals, we also have things like this. This is bitter panic grass, or Panicum amarum. Beautiful blue grass. This is not something that's planted in beach dune restorations, but it's a very deep-rooted plant. And it grows about 3.5 foot tall. And if you're trapping sand and you're only this tall, you're trapping sand, this wind-blown sand, in the air 3 inches tall. You saw that little plant, that little tiny purslane. It's trapping a lot of sand for being as short as it is. 3.5 foot tall, you're trapping a lot of sand. You're trapping all of that windblown sand that's within where that plant is. So this is a great plant. It helps to stabilize. It's kind of, as I said, the mature redwood of beach dune. In order to restore our beaches appropriately and find out the right plants, besides just COs, we had to go out and I look at all of our beach dunes and watch them change and shift over time. I've got about 6 years of walking the beaches and looking at how they change on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. One of the things that we did was we identified a whole list of plants that we thought should be in beach dune restorations and weren't. And we went out and we found some of these in nurseries, and sometimes we bought every one we could find some of these plants, and sometimes that was 5. These were not plants. These plants were available at like a garden center. They'd have a couple that were growing for someone's home landscape. But we went out and we bought these and we planted them in a couple of different spots in collaboration with the city of Naples. So this was a pilot project. They had removed some invasives and we were planting these back as natives instead of just the seals. So we planted about 15 different species instead of just the one seals. And when you wash your car and so it's going to rain, we planted these and 1 year later we had. That was not planned, but it was a test of these plants. So this is beach elder, Iva imbricata. This is, I can't remember, I get all of my hurricanes are now conglomerated in my head into one long day. This was after, I think this is after Ian. The storm, you can see it devastated that plant. This is about 3 weeks or so afterwards. The plant was dead, and that plant started resprouting from the base. So when it gets eroded like that, that plant will recover. So it's starting to resprout. Note where that signpost is. This is later on that summer. It spread just in a few months, spread to cover a large area. It had trapped about 18 to 24 inches of sand. That plant formed its own dune. That plant recovered after a storm. So that's resilience. That's what we need. You can see where that signpost is in the middle of that. That's the same signpost. One of the things that you also notice is that there's bitter panic grass growing out of that spot. So that plant traps seeds. It's forming its own dune ecosystem, and it's healing, it is resilient. This is the same species, but in a different location. This is after Adalia. That plant traps sand. What happens when this plant traps sand when it looks like this? I went out to this plant a couple weeks after, this is the day after the storm. This is 12 hours after Adalia. I went out to this spot and a couple weeks later, I dug down just to see what happened. This plant had already started regrowing. All that got buried just put out new roots. That plant just like when you plant a tomato and plant it deep, the shoots just put out new roots and it's recovering. So this plant is adapted to this really dynamic beach dune ecosystem. Hurricane Idalia passed Southwest Florida on August 29th. It was a wind event. It's not, we think of beach dunes and erosion, but wind events are important as well. They help move sand around. And that's when plants really build dunes. So I went out on August 30th. This is one of our field sites. I have a series of photos here. The camera is in the same location. It just pans. This was an accident, and I realized that I had great data. Camera pans to the south and up a little bit, but same location. August 30th, 12 hours after the storm. You can see little bits of brown there. That's railroad vine. That's a native morning glory vine that grows along the coast. You can see that it was buried by a few inches of sand, and most of the leaves were burnt by wind-blown sand with salt in it. September 15th, 2 weeks later. That's resilience. That plant is recovering. This is 2 weeks after the storm. September 29th. It's difficult to see, but there's two big purple flowers in the middle. 4 weeks after the storm, 1 month, this plant is producing flowers. That means it's producing a seed bank. Those seeds are the future of this dune when we have more storms. So if we have a storm that erodes this area, we get a lot of wave action. Those seeds will germinate, grow, and help repair its resiliency again. The next slide is the big one. I went back to this spot several times. This is what this looked like 7 months later. Those two people are the same height. That $5 plant trapped 2 feet of sand across this huge area of the beach. We spent $24 million trucking in sand to build an emergency berm after the last series of storms. We lost a lot of that sand this summer. That sand does not last for very long. That renourishment was the right thing to do. It's expensive, but they built an emergency berm that helped protect us, that reduced the wave impact during storms. But now Collier County is going back and planting that. They're planting 1 million beach dune plants across this area. They're including the right plant diversity. They're including natives. They're including, I think, up to 15 species. We help them write the plan to do this. And they're planting locally collected plant materials. So you all think it's challenging when you want to plant a garden in your home and you can't find the plants. You need 1 or 2. I need 1 million for beach dunes. Where are we going to get that? So one of the things that Naples Botanical Garden has done has partnered with partners like Rookery Bay. And we've gone out and we can go out and collect. And we can collect 50 or 100 cuttings or 50 or 100 seeds from across the beach. And we can sometimes just take one tiny little piece of plant like this. We take those back and it doesn't have an impact on the environment, very minimal impact. But we take them back and we propagate those and we grow them out into these large bulking beds. From here, we can collect seeds. You can see all those purple flowers. Or we can collect cuttings. And if we need 1 million plants, we can go out and we can say we need 100,000 of one species. We can take 100,000 cuttings off of that and we can grow those. We can make them available pretty much overnight for beach dune restoration. Since November, from this collection, we've amassed 500,000 seeds, so 500,000 seeds from this collection. So when we do have hurricanes and storms, we can be able to respond pretty much right away now with plants. We have an emergency response to help restore our dunes. Dunes aren't magic. It's not going to protect us from everything. We get these giant storms with 15-foot of storm surge. That overwhelms our natural system. But we get lots of other storms, day-to-day, unnamed storms, smaller storms. We need to be protected against those. We need to be resilient so our beaches can open after these storms. But we're going to be planting and managing our beach dunes in the future in perpetuity. Yeah, this is an off-site. It's off-site. Yeah, it's part of the garden, but it's off-site. It's our bulking nursery. Yeah. The primary invasive is from in Southeast Asia. It's scabola. And we have a native scabola, and the two look very similar. But it's a wide, waxy leaf-looking plant, and it takes over. So you'll find it growing in monocultures along the beach, and it's hard to kill. And then you cut it off, and it comes back. You have to pull the roots out or cut it and treat it with an herbicide. But they remove large areas of that. When they do, if it comes back, that one plant typically has one function. We need all of these plants. We need those that recover quickly after the storm, those pioneer species. We need all the different trophies, all the different functions of all of those different plants. So removing that and planting this with our natives is perfect. So now I'm going to shift to talk about the urban forest and native. This is a tree in one of our parking lots at the garden. This is Quercus virginiana, or the oak tree. This is one of our common native plants, and I've talked to some communities that have thousands of these planted within the community. It's an important plant for pollinators. It's an important plant for insects. It's an important plant for wildlife because of the acorns that it produces. However, we're at the southern edge of the range for this species. This species has a range across the southeastern United States, and we're towards the south end of that native range of this plant. We tend to plant a lot of these. We tend to overplant oaks and mahoganies. They're natives. They're important, but we rely on just 1 or 2 species. We need to identify more species diversity. We need to trial those in our urban forests. We need to show that they work, and then we need to produce lots of them for the urban forest, so that we can also have them in nurseries and buy them for our own yards. So this is the oak tree, native oak tree. This is going to be really difficult to see, but there's a spot here. This is using climate models, really rudimentary models, to figure out if a tree species is going to live in our climate in the future. So this box right here, that's the thing to pay attention to. Red is bad, green is good, and red, yellow, orange, green. Yellow is at the edge of its known temperature range for this species. Oak trees are at the edge of the known temperature range for the species here currently. We look at 2050, all of the models, those different models, we're outside of its range. The temperature range for oaks in 2050 is, this is under conservative climate model. Oaks don't survive. A lot of things happen to them. They get weakened by the heat, pests and diseases. They have trouble pulling moisture up out of the soil. In California, we talked to some of our colleagues in the gardens there, and trees are shedding their branches because they cannot pull enough moisture out of the soil. So they get what's called cavitation, and they drop their branches. They get more susceptible to diseases. There are diseases for oaks across the entire United States. So we've got to shift away from just planting oaks. If we model this out to 2090, I think it is, there's no way oaks survive here. That sounds like a long way away. 2050 sounds like a long way away. That's just 25 years. In the lifespan of a tree, that's important to think about the future. However, there are other opportunities. This is Lysoloma sabbaticu. This is native to Cuba. There's another one called Lysoloma laticeligum that's native to Florida. I prefer the Cuban tree. This is called Cuban tamarind. The other ones are native tamarind tree. It doesn't produce edible tamarind fruit. Tamarind trees, if you want to plant a butterfly tree, tamarins, I've seen swallowtails. I've seen so many butterflies on a tree. It's incredible. They have little white, beautiful flowers. I prefer the Cuban one because it has deep roots. Our native one has shallower roots. Beautiful shaped tree, bright red foliage. When the new foliage flushes out, it'll flush out throughout the year. Both of them are great trees. I like the deeper rooted tree for our urban forest because we want something that's going to impact our sidewalks. The Cuban one still feeds butterflies, still feeds insects. It's native to just 90 miles off of our coast. It's native to ecosystems that equate to our ecosystems. It still feeds birds. This is the climate model currently, absolutely within its temperature range. 2050, still within its temperature range. So this tree is going to survive well. This tree is going to provide food for insects, for wildlife. This tree will perform well in our urban forests. There are very few of them in the urban forests now. There's a bunch of different trees that we need to look to grow, and an urban forest doesn't shift overnight. It's moved at the scale of trees. So one of the things that we're doing at Naples Botanical Garden is working with the city and county to try and get more of these into the landscape. You have to get landscape architects on board. So we work with them doing programs to teach them, hey, these are important trees. They have to see them in the landscape. They're not going to risk their reputation saying, oh, this guy told me this is a great tree. They want to see it. They want to be able to take their clients to see it. So we need to produce these in large numbers. If we can produce these to scale of the economy for the urban forest, if we can get these out in city and county, plant thousands of them, that's a huge impact, and we can make them more available to the homeowner. This is kind of a neat little exercise. I did this just before coming here. I thought, let's look at what's the value of a tree. So we're sitting in this building right here. We're sitting right about here. I planted a tree on the corner here. This is a tool called iTree. This is available freely online, and I've got a link to it. I planted a tree there. I planted that tree, that Lysoloma tree. You can put a tree in a location. You can put a tree in your yard, and it'll ask you what size tree you're planting. And I said 1-inch caliper tree, so the trunk is 1 inch at chest height. My tree, the iTree program, there's a section called My Tree, and that's the homeowner version. Over 20 years, $405 in carbon dioxide uptake, stormwater mitigation, $9.47. That's not including the environmental damage that stormwater pollutants cause off of our coast. Air pollution removal, $415 over 20 years. Doesn't sound like a lot, Within the city of Naples right-of-ways, I sat down here a minute ago and looked at the numbers. We have 30,000 trees within just our right-of-ways in the park. That's not the entire urban forest. That's just a few feet off of the side of our streets in the city of Naples. $400, that's $15 million over 20 years. If you scale that up across the entire urban forest, that's hundreds of millions of dollars worth of function that they're providing. This is a fun tool because you can plant a tree in your yard of a certain size. You can tell it what size, and you can find out all of these different things, what it's doing for the environment, and what are some of the. I like to bring not just the environmental side, but the economic side. It's neat to see that it's not just about the environment. There's a huge economic benefit to planting native plants. Anybody's interested in using this tool? It's called iTree. There's a link to it right there. You can scan that with your phone, and that'll take you to iTree. So I'll wait just a moment on that. And I would use the part called My Tree. It says start here. There's several different tools. You can analyze an entire urban forest, which that takes a lot more work and a lot more training to use some of those tools. So yeah.
Next 10 years.
Yes, we did. Yes.
I just, friends say, all of this, I thought about it for my own grant, but this kind of work is really to plan for you and
shift we have to make. When you plant a tree for current conditions, think about what it'll be like in 25 years. So if you were around last summer, it's hot. It's hot all summer. It's hot at night. I have a laser heat gun. It's a $25 thing from Home Depot. I stood in our parking lot. There was a 28-degree temperature difference in our parking lot between the shade and full sun. It's a lot. And think of that heat, that emits heat all night, that asphalt does for concrete. So we absolutely need more shade. We need to mitigate that heat. Heat is one of the biggest impacts of climate change that will impact us. We think since storms, heat is also up there. A couple other neat tools. There's a tool called Natives for Your Neighborhood. I'll go ahead and put the barcode up there for that. This is a neat tool from Institute for Regional Conservation. You can put in our zip code, and it'll tell you all the plants that are native to our area. When you click on a plant, I clicked on pigeon plum, Cocolobia diversifolia. It's related to sea grape. But it'll tell you how available it is. It'll tell you, sometimes it'll link to a nursery where you can buy that plant. It'll tell you how tall it gets, where it grows natively. It'll tell you what its pollinators are. You can click on a plant to find out all of its pollinator interactions, not all, but on some of the primary ones. You can also put in a pollinator and find out what plants to plant to attract that pollen. So Natives to Your Neighborhood is a great website. It's based out of Institute for Regional Conservation, which is a great nonprofit here in South Florida. The other one is FAN, Florida Association of Native Nurseries. You can go to FAN, you can click on a plant, and it'll tell you which nurseries have that plant. So it's a great tool to be able to look this up. Again, we know that to make this change possible, we need to make natives more widely available. So that's why at the garden we're working on this big scale. Because we can make a big impact on the environment, on the quality of life, on the economy, and the people who live here. Well, if we make that big change, that big shift, we know that homeowners, all of that will follow. This material planter will be more available for our homes. I think that's enough. So I'll stop there. Good. All right. There's a link to Naples Botanical Garden's nature-based solutions website. Thank you.
Let's take full questions right now because it is 4:30, but chat's still here if you would like to ask questions. I am going to give a quick little spiel. So first off, Chad mentioned earlier the Greenscape Alliance. So that is a big reason as to why we are doing this today. Rookery Bay is a part of the Greenscape Alliance. And so this is part of the goals that they have is that they want to help increase native plants. They want to help water conservation, tree conservation, preservation, and correct maintenance. That's why we are putting on these lecture series. As a note, we will have 2 more coming up. So we have one on April 9th that is focused on irrigation and water conservation, as well as the ecosystem services of wetlands. And we also have one on April 16th that is talking about urban trees. So Chad's last part of this presentation actually ties into that one. So if that was something you're interested in and would like to learn more about, we'll have a few other people here to talk about it on April 16th. All of this is on the sheet over here. It's on our website, rookerybay.org/events. So if you are interested in attending those, feel free to check it out. With this day, so I'm trying to like organize all of my stuff. First off, Marissa right now is handing out evaluations. So we are a needs-based program. We are only able to put on stuff that we know people need or want. So if you wouldn't mind, please fill it out and return it back to us so that we can know, hey, this is something that people are interested in, and we can provide more opportunities such as this to our communities. In addition, if you needed CEUs, Marissa is the one to see. So when you're giving her your evaluations back, she can give you your CEU. Another big thank you to Veranza for sponsoring us. We're really appreciative of it. So we could give them a big round of applause for providing us a food mix. Yeah, please, soda's in the cooler. Please polish off the snacks if you can. For today, we will be sending out a follow-up email. So that will have